Hi, my name is Katie Norwood. I am an LCSW. I'm also a licensed school social worker and a registered play therapist. And I am joined today by Dr. Susan Elswick and Dr. Angela Hargrave. And we are going to be talking about the supports that we provide within our schools for social emotional learning. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself and just give a brief description of the work specifically that you've been doing and how it impacts the social emotional health of our schools and our students.
Okay.
Good morning. I am Angela Hargrave. I serve as the Executive Director of the Office of Student Equity, Enrollment, and Discipline, otherwise known as SEED, for Shelby County Schools. So I am happy to be here today and share some of the experiences that we have had as we have worked to support students' emotional and mental health wellness.
And I'm Dr. Elswick. I'm an associate professor at the University of Memphis in the School of Social Work. I'm also the school social work coordinator, which I work with colleagues and students that are working towards their school social work licensure in the state of Tennessee. We've been supporting the social emotional learning of children through education and workforce development at the university, in addition to direct practice in the community.
Wonderful. So I have been, I'm a clinical social worker, and I've been practicing clinical social work licensed as an LCSW since 2010, and I started working in the schools as a licensed school social worker in 2013. Providing a variety of services, everywhere from individual therapy to group therapy, social emotional, groups, functional behavior assessments, behavior intervention plans. So basically, if any of you know school social workers, you know that we just kind of go in and do whatever they ask us to. So we're pretty flexible. A lot of parent supports, a lot of teacher supports. So those are, in a brief description, those are some of the things that I've been doing over the past 8 years. Yeah. What are some of the specific things?
Well, and I think that's interesting that you said that, like, when we think about school-based practice, we have to think about it from that kind of holistic lens, right? It's not just the child, it's including teacher, mental health, and their social emotional needs, in addition to ensuring that the parents and the families and caregivers are also provided directive services. So in this last academic year, really assisted with the schools with really focusing on not just the child and student social emotional needs, but also assessing the needs of the teachers. What teachers do need additional support, and how can we provide that so that they can be the best caregiver they can to the students. But we also have to think about the fact that we need to prepare our clinicians for addressing things like what just happened in the pandemic, like being prepared to provide telebehavioral health supports if needed, how to provide educational services in that kind of telehealth platform. So during the pandemic, I actually was funded and started a SMART Center, which is a school-based mental health resources through telehealth center to help support that need in the community. And we provide directive services to children and families in the local community, in addition to training and consultation to schools who are trying to still utilize technology as part of their programming for mental and behavioral health.
That's all?
That's it. Just a little.
So, very exciting to hear. Also, with Shelby County Schools, of course, as we started to address the discipline in schools, I think around 2018, we said, okay, we are not really seeing the declines in suspensions and those exclusionary consequences to students, which we know are things that can actually contribute to additional trauma, depending on what led to that behavior in the beginning. So we really have worked to try to inform our teachers and all of the adults, parents who are, who have access to our children. We've really worked to try to inform them on how those adverse childhood experiences impact children,
Yes.
because the district, of course, has had a licensed mental health center for over 50 years. So we have clinicians, and we know that they have been working to address student mental health needs, but we also realize that really it's something that everyone has to be able to support. So any adult who has an opportunity to touch our children, or is going to be impacting their lives, we feel like it's important that they all also understand ACEs and how they impact children. So that's been part of the work that we started 3 years ago. And then, of course, the pandemic just really kind of moved us to how do we make sure our children are okay, even in a virtual world, while we were trying to maintain safety. So we did move toward the teletherapy, as well as we launched a social emotional support line back in April of 2020, so that we could have a platform for our students and parents to reach out to us if they needed assistance or just had questions.
Awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I would like to tag on is that it's so amazing that Shelby County Schools has that licensed mental health agency. A lot of the charter schools, and private schools, don't have that. So a lot of them do contract with private agencies, such as Behavior Services of the Mid-South, to provide those interventions. And so the next question, and I don't know that we're going to hit the highlights. This is the highlight reel. Can you describe some of the important lessons that you've learned as you continuously refine the strategies and gotten better? And you kind of touched on that already with identifying the trauma and addressing that and understanding ACEs. And I know Dr. Elswick and I are both part of the Building Strong Brains in Tennessee, where we do those presentations to the community, to schools, to the teachers, to help educate them and the parents. So what are some lessons that we're all lifelong learners.
Right.
What are some of the lessons that you all have learned?
So I definitely feel, that kind of concept that it has to be a holistic approach is just so very evident. Like when you think about tier-based supports, we have largely focused on the child for a really long time, which is great, and we need to do that. But also understanding that tier-based approach, that RTI model, can also be used to support teachers, administrators, staff, and even families. And so I think really looking at the child from a holistic approach is probably the largest gain I think we've seen, and that we're focusing on more now as we move towards that social emotional learning and programming we want everybody to have access to.
Absolutely.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree, and that is one of the reasons why our focus in just the whole learning process has not just been on the students, but also on the parents, the teachers, the administrators. So we have ensured that everyone in the district has access to just the basic awareness level of training, but then beyond that, we have ongoing professional development for our teachers, such as creating safe spaces, adult self-care, because throughout the process of us, and so our initial team went to Nashville to become the trainer of trainers for Building Strong Brains, and then they came back and have provided the training throughout the district. But even in some of the sessions that I had the privilege to be a part of, we heard from our teachers and our adults, and some of them just talked about the difficulty that they were having even while they were trying to take care of children. So we've had just sessions to try to help our principals understand how to create environments where teachers have a space to make sure that they are okay and able to take care of children. So I think that's one of the first lessons that we learned, was that we really have to make sure that our adults are okay and that they understand what's happening. So when we tell them that, we need you to recognize signs of trauma and respond, that they really understand what that means and they know how to protect themselves in that process.
That's right.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. A few of the things, as you both were speaking, that were just kind of popping in my head is definitely, supporting the teachers, letting them know and demonstrating that they, so they can feel supported. We can say we support our teachers, we support our students, but we've got to be able to demonstrate that. So I think for me, one of the lessons, one of the many lessons I learn lessons every day, is just that humility piece of we are constantly learning, and we're learning new ways and better ways to do things, and we want to not get stuck, in our old ways of doing things, and so we do have to have that humility of being open to learning, and we model that. So then, our teachers can model that as well. I'm going to ask this question, and you are like mind readers, because I think we kind of touched on a lot of this, but I want to make sure that we get to this one before our time's over. Or what are some of the biggest obstacles that you face in implementing statewide program or system-wide programs, to improve the student social emotional health?
Well, of course, I have to say for us, it has traditionally been funding.
Absolutely.
And the idea of really investing in social emotional wellness and having enough staff who is dedicated and trained and experienced in addressing that is something that has, I think, kind of taken a back seat to all of the other needs. And so funding definitely has been the biggest obstacle for us, because we know that human capital is really key. It's critical. You have to have people, if you're talking about somebody who's going to be there to recognize what's going on with the child or establish relationships so that that child or that family, that parent will trust you, or even share about some of the things. You have to have people in the building for that.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. And, talking about the funding piece is such a huge part of it. And then also helping adults to shape the way they think about behavior, because oftentimes we look at behavior in a very punitive way, and really trying to help families and adults in the child's life really realize behavior is just a way that children communicate. And so what they're really trying to tell us something with that behavior, and for us to be a little bit more reflective and sit back and try to identify what is that. But that's for everybody. Adults show behavior too for certain reasons, and as administrators and support staff, we need to be also recognizing that in our teachers too. What are they trying to tell us? What are their needs? And then I would say another large challenge of doing systemic or system-wide interventions is really getting buy-in. And buy-in not just so that the teachers want to be on board, but so that they understand it. So really creating a transparent understanding of why this will be beneficial, not just for the student learner, but for everybody, for the system as a whole. And so I'm really passionate about hearing the voices of teachers and listening to schools. Oftentimes when we go in as direct clinicians, we're a host provider. We're not in that classroom 8 hours a day with the kid that's displaying that behavior. And so being very conscious of that and listening to the teacher's needs, and also embedding what they're asking as part of that intervention. If an intervention doesn't feel right for a teacher, let's find an alternative. And so it's really that open communication and transparency around what's needed and what's going to be most important for the student, for the staff, and then for the school as a whole.
You took buy-in. You took those words out of my mouth. It is so important, and it's buy-in from everyone, the student as well. Sometimes we unknowingly reinforce some of those negative behaviors at home and in the schools, and so starting where the student is, starting where the teacher is, starting where the family is, and understanding that we have a great opportunity to teach and to educate, and to share our knowledge and new skills with people. But it is about connecting and building that rapport, so that they it's so cheesy, but it's so true. They don't know, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
It's true.
And I don't mind being cheesy. We've got just when we've talked about some of the initiatives. Can you all think of any of the other initiatives that are being implemented?
Yes. So one of the initiatives that we started 2 years ago, just in a small group of schools and pilot schools, is reset rooms, because when we talk about responding to student behavior, as Dr. Elswick said, it has typically been a punitive response. So in our efforts to move to a more restorative response, we implemented reset rooms, and I'm so excited to say that we're expanding those across the district this year. And the reset room is simply a calming space where a student who may be upset or may have already committed some type of infraction will be able to go and talk to someone and kind of get back on track. And it's not punitive, and it's not a suspension. And the idea is that they will be allowed to return to class and be able to access learning.
I love that. Do you have anything else to say in 10 seconds or less?
The only thing I would say is the university is also very passionate about ensuring that we have enough clinicians to provide these service delivery. So we work pretty closely with the state and around advocacy to increase the number of school social workers and school psychologists and counselors in the school buildings. And so that's something we're very passionate about and will continue to do. So.
Wonderful. Dr. Hargrave. Dr. Elswick, I appreciate your time, and I encourage all of you to stick around, and we can explore any of these topics further during the question and answer portion of the session.
Well, we're so grateful to our presenters for sharing all those great insights about what's happening systematically around SEL here in Memphis. And we're excited to have time to speak more with them and ask any questions. So we're gonna have some Q&A time with our presenters. We're really excited about that. If you have questions for our presenters, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll make sure they get to them. Or if you wanna message them to me directly through the chat so they're anonymous, that's just fine as well. And we can do that. But we'll start off with a few questions just about what our presenters shared so far, because they had so many great insights about how to approach SEL in a systematic way here. Are we all good for that? I'm just asking the session producer, are we good to go for the kind of panel discussion? Great. Well, then I wanted to launch in with this. In watching the session and thinking about what you shared, I was thinking about when you think about a holistic approach to SEL mental health, you all mentioned various elements, direct student services, support for parents and teachers, PD for teachers, school structures like reset rooms. There are a lot of elements. And when you kind of think about all those different pieces, which of those elements, or maybe it's something else, what do you think is kind of the foundation that all of that sits on? What needs to be in place in schools for those pieces to work?
So I'm going to say that I think that the foundation of it just starts with your teachers, your staff, and just having them be equipped with what they need to be prepared and ready to receive the students in the right way.
Absolutely. I would say, that foundation is your philosophy and the culture that you want to model and demonstrate. And so it's, it starts maybe with an idea or on paper, but we have to emanate that. We have to model that in everything that we do, not just, in our grants that we write to get money. It has to be how we treat each other, how we treat the families and the students and our teachers and everyone involved.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also realized I just launched right in because I was so excited to talk to you that I should introduce myself for our participants. My name is Frank Jemison, and I'm an SEL consultant for schools and organizations here in town. But I love that you said that kind of it starts with the teachers and kind of our mindset and philosophy. And you mentioned that in the presentation about the importance of shaping adult mindsets and getting buy-in, whether it's about understanding trauma or understanding behavior as communication. I had a few follow-up questions about that key element of shaping mindsets. First off, like, how do you do that? We all know it's important for that to happen, but what have you found is most effective in strengthening or changing teacher and staff mindsets around behavior, trauma, and emotions?
I think that it's all rooted in the relationships, but also them being able to relate to students. So it's been my experience that when a teacher or an adult can relate to a student in such a way that they see themselves in their student or something familiar with that behavior, they view the behavior differently. So it's not just, oh, this is a child who I don't want to deal with. This child is out of control. Even sometimes it's odd, but it may sound odd, but even I've seen teachers who may have had difficulty in the past with dealing with the student until they have a grandchild who exhibits some of their behavior. And then they seem to relate better and understand it. And then they start to think about, oh, well, my grandchild did the same thing. And, I still was able to, we were able to love him through this behavior and get him on track. And honestly, I've seen a teacher who then would, just treat her students differently and respond to behavior differently after she was able to relate better. So that's why I say relationships and being able to relate to the students.
I think that is brilliant. In the work that I do as a social worker, relationship is everything, and they don't care, how many techniques I teach them until we have that connection and that rapport. And so I think a lot of times too, it's that goodness of fit, when people are applying for these positions, or if students applying to come to this specific school, of is there a good fit there, and how do we adjust to build those relationships. And I think humility is part of that, of being open to learning and understanding that each child, each student kind of comes with their own unique strengths and things like that. So I think being open and willing to learn, not getting stuck in our ways, which is easy to do,
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. And having worked with teachers and having been a teacher myself, that I could relate to my students with behavior challenges because I was a student with behavior challenges. I think that makes a lot of sense. And we've all seen the teachers who, just have it, that they can connect with the students, they can see past the facade of bad behavior, and then others who can't. And I think, Dr. Hargrave, you shared something helpful, that sometimes people's personal experiences or their changed personal experience, a new grandchild or something like that, can help them relate better. But what are things that we can do as a school system to help teachers grow in that relationship, to help move some of the teachers from the don't have it category to the more have it category, whether that's PD or one-on-one work or SEL coaching? What are the things that help people grow in their ability to relate and build that relationship and relate to their students?
Definitely, I think it's professional development that helps them to learn about brain development and some of the causes of the way that students are behaving or reacting, and just giving the teachers tools that will help them know how to address those behaviors, or even set their classrooms up to be welcoming environments I think so. I do definitely think that professional development, ongoing professional development, not one-time conversations, help teachers to be able to shift their mindsets, build relationships, and understand student behavior better. Because a lot of times, we're afraid of things we don't understand. And so what the ongoing professional development and even the teacher coaching and modeling, what that does is help them to be able to understand and not necessarily be afraid of addressing student behavior.
One thing I would add is, just from a behavioral standpoint and perspective, we know that all behavior has meaning and purpose. We're trying to get some kind of a need met. And so I always kind of have to keep that in the front of my mind, and to remain curious and to try to understand what the meaning of that behavior is. And another thing, I recently just completed another compassion fatigue seminar, which was for educators and mental health professionals. And one of the things they said was the best way to combat compassion fatigue was compassion. And so I think that we go in with that compassion piece so we can be open to learning and understanding and connecting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'd love to hear any successes you've seen. Where have you seen teachers that did shift mindsets, who are learning to see something a new way, and their classrooms functioning better, and their students have, more space to be their whole selves and all of that? Where have you seen some wins from kind of PD and going in with a curious and compassionate lens?
We've had lots of wins. As I said, my department handles discipline. And so really for me, all of this really started around us trying to help teachers and administrators view students' behavior differently and not be so punitive, to move to a restorative environment. And so we have absolutely seen successes in several of our schools with the administrators. I tease one of our principals because he would just be suspending everybody. And, he would just be like, that's it, zero tolerance, you fight, you're out of here. And now his conversations are different. His teachers' conversations are different. And, I remember after we had done the ACEs training, and his school was one of our first trauma-informed schools to go through the trainings. And I remember he called one time and he was so excited because he had a group of students who had been caught vandalizing the restroom. And normally he said, now, before you all got to us, we would have just put them all out of here for a few days. But instead of putting them out, and this was without us prompting him, he got with his admin team, and they got the students, and they had them to prepare like a kind of a presentation about school pride. And of course they had to clean the things off the bathroom wall and everything, but then they talked to their classmates about the importance of school pride and caring about their school. And so I just thought that was just such a shift for him. But as the leader of their building, I also saw that the mindset of his teachers shifted, because their responses to student behavior became much more restorative, and not just get this child out of my classroom, but hey, I see something's going on with this child, that let me get the counselor in and let's see what we can do to help address some of this child's needs.
A couple of things that I would say that I notice, the fact that we have programs and we have people in positions that are just employed to focus on social emotional learning. I think that's a huge progress from when I started. And also, students reaching out to me to say, hey, can we start this group at school? Can we start a social emotional support group? And so seeing people advocate for themselves and having other programs and people seeing that it's important now, and that social emotional piece is important for schools. That's progress that I've noticed.
Yeah, those are great to hear, and really fun to see people, the benefit of laying that foundation of mindset and buy-in. So kind of my last question around this is, what comes next? Is if getting our mindset shifted, getting people to understand and train is the foundation of how we systematically approach SEL. Kind of what builds on top of that? What are the things that you are seeing or hope to see in schools as you get those foundational mindsets set?
Again, like I said, just not having this be a one-time conversation or something that you start and then stop. I think that the kind of moving into next steps beyond what we've already done is to just be able to sustain the ongoing professional development, the support to schools, because I think that oftentimes what we hear from schools or have heard has been, we want to spend more time trying to find out what's happening with children, but when we're understaffed and the accountability for the academic side is so high that you don't feel like you have space to spend the time trying to address the social emotional needs of students. And so I think that what we'd like to see is just a continued investments in the social emotional supports in schools with the dedicated staff. The being able to expand the reset rooms, of course, for us has been really a game changer, because we saw such great success in the 30 schools where we were able to pilot it. And we know that it's needed, because it definitely is something that helps to create a safe space for students to get them back on track and return to the learning environment much faster than if you did not have that staff and did not have that space. Then many schools would resort to punitive measures just because it's the quick and easy thing to do.
Absolutely. The only thing I would say is, once you implement something, obviously that continuous quality improvement, and so constantly evaluating the programs and the interventions that you're implementing to see, we can always improve. And so kind of having that mindset of always, just trying to improve upon, what's already, working.
Great. I mean, that sounds really good. I can keep going, and I've got other questions I'm excited about, but I want to just again offer the opportunity to folks who are participating. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure those get answered as well. But while we're waiting for those to come in, I do want to go off something you said, Dr. Hargrave, about hoping things continue to get funded. And that you mentioned that that funding has historically been one of the bigger obstacles to doing this work well, for a variety of reasons. And I know we're in a season now, because of some of the federal funding, where there's a little bit more flexibility in that area. So I want to ask you, kind of thinking about that, like, if money weren't an obstacle, or even less of an obstacle, what would be some of the first initiatives that you'd want to see either in select pilot schools or across the district, if you could wave a magic wand?
Just the human capital being there, being available to, with the support inside the classrooms, because I know that the best place for students to be is in the classroom, being able to engage in learning. And sometimes just a teacher in a classroom with 30 students, you just can't meet all of the students' needs within that room, that space. So if we of course could have adequate funding, we would have smaller class sizes, but we would also have those assistants, particularly in those lower grades. In those primary grades, you would have an assistant in the classroom to support the students as well as the staff to provide wraparound services. Wraparound services are so critical to making sure that we're able to address the whole child. The teacher just cannot do it all in the classroom. We have actually stretched our counselors very thin because counselors are expected to provide academic supports and social emotional support. And sometimes there's one counselor for an entire school. And so, with adequate funding, we would absolutely be able to have someone dedicated to social emotional supports, separate and aside from the academic supports in the school. So, additional counselors and behavior supports in every school, and the ongoing professional development and just the space to really. So one of the other things we've done is we are implementing an SEL curriculum, and so we're excited about that. But I would really want to see us be able to move that curriculum into the space where it is embedded in the regular curriculum and just part of what teachers do and how they teach, and they know how to integrate the social emotional strategies into all of their other lessons.
Yeah, so I hear you saying that it's really an issue of having the people to be able to manage all the behavioral and social emotional needs that students have, and then kind of the time and space to be able to do that. Yeah, that's
Right.
I think that's a lot.
It is. I mean, because, and the reason I say that is because we are not going to be able to stop the world from happening around us. So, in other words, children are going to continue to experience trauma. They are going to continue to show up at school not ready to learn and not prepared. And so when they get there, then we need to be prepared to receive them and take them wherever they are. We are not running an assembly line where if a product comes through that is damaged, we can just throw it to the side and not use it. If our students come to us damaged, then we have to take them and we have to do our best to get them where they need to be. And so that is going, for many of our students, that just requires some extra TLC, that we need the human capital in the building to be able to have the time and space to do that.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Katie, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
I think Dr. Hargrave nailed it.
Yeah,
Resources. Yeah.
I mean, I think that really is a big factor. I always like to compare what's happening academically and socially, emotionally, and kind of how many people, how much time, how many resources, and then we wonder why they're out of balance. Well, I did want to kind of thinking about that, of getting sufficient people in the building and the mindset pieces we talked about. Those are kind of, sounds like, two foundational elements, kind of getting the conditions right to be able to do SEL work well. Are there other conditions, things that schools need to get right to begin with, whether it's the human capital piece or the mindset piece, that, hey, this really needs to be in place for a school to be able to approach SEL in a holistic, systematic way?
I think some of our buildings are old and depressing to walk into, for lack of a better word. And I think that all of our students should be able to learn in an environment that is modernized with the most recent technology, so that, when they go out into the world, they're prepared for the world, because technology is constantly advancing. And so I think that, having those state-of-the-art buildings with the advanced and, current technology helps to prepare our students. Number one, it makes them feel good about coming there and being in that space, but also better prepares them for going out into the world and being ready to engage in society.
one thing that to add to that, as far as conditions, from a social work perspective, we start where the client is. And we approach it from a strengths-based perspective. And so, that's, that's all that I can add to that. We go in whatever door is open and, start where they are and kind of teach up, build up from there. Because everybody's got strengths. Sometimes it's, a challenge to maybe identify those, but that's one of our challenges that, we take on.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I hear both of you saying is that we need to be equipped from a structural standpoint to not be in an industrial mode of educating, that we expect X project to come in and you behave this way. Basically, you behave in order to learn, and we're going to put these standards in you academically and ship you out the door. That we need to be able to respond to where students are coming in. And that takes human capital. It takes mindsets. It also takes coming into an environment that everyone wants to be in. And, a 70-year-old falling apart building is not usually that. And so I think that makes a lot of sense when I hear moves to like, we can't be in this industrialized system and expect students to get the social emotional capacities and mental health supports that they need. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I did want to close with kind of one more specific question. Dr. Hargrave, you talked about the reset rooms. I'd love to hear more about how those are going. Kind of when do students get sent there? What happens when they're there? What does success in the reset room look like? What kind of supports do students receive there? Kind of what's the reset room experience like for students who are able to use that space?
Absolutely. First, I do want to put a plug in that we are still trying to hire all of our reset assistants. So if you know someone who's looking for a job, we do still have openings for reset assistants. So, of course, we're expanding the reset assistants to all of the reset rooms to all schools. So that's quite a number of positions that we're trying to fill. But the reset room is an opportunity for a student who may be upset, may have been disrupting the classroom or something like that, to come into a space with an assistant a person who's been trained on de-escalation strategies, and just they go through a full gamut of restorative practices, and that person is there to meet the student where they are and bring them in there. The room is set up. The rooms are being designed to be calming spaces, and the student can stay in the room for anywhere up to an hour, depending on what's going on with them. They may not need 15 to 20 minutes, but they can stay in the room up to an hour and hopefully able to get back on track and then return to the classroom environment and receive instruction. So it's definitely a restorative environment. When a student is brought into the reset room, they are going to have an opportunity if they just need to talk to someone. We want our reset assistants to be able to kind of be known around the building, build relationships with students so that students feel comfortable coming to them, letting them know what's going on. And we also have supports from our social workers, from our mental health center, as well as our behavior specialists who also support the reset rooms.
So are students sent for infractions and some misbehavior? Kind of what's the protocol for a student getting sent to the reset room?
So it could be just a typical kind of behavior that is sent to the office. So you may have a student, I'll give an example, you may have a student who gets into a verbal altercation in class with someone, and the teacher may, contact the office, may, push the call button for an administrator or send a student to the office, and then that administrator would would then give the child an opportunity to go to the reset room. They would take the child to the reset room or send them to reset, as opposed to issuing some sort of disciplinary consequence. And then once the student goes through the reset room, then they finish that process in there. They may do a 6-minute SEL lesson. We have 6-minute SEL lessons in there, or things that will be specific to whatever behavior they're addressing or whatever need they may have. And then that student should be returned back to the classroom.
That sounds great, and I hope you all can get them all fully staffed, because I know how helpful reset rooms can be, not only in reducing exclusionary discipline, but also in helping students get the support that they need. I think that about brings our time to a close, unless anyone in the chat again has questions. But I just wanted to thank you both for being here and for your insights and wisdom on how to lead with the heart and approach SEL in schools systematically in order to meet the needs of the whole child. So thank you so much for your time. I know it's been a really full day at the conference today so far. I'm excited about tomorrow. And so I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.